Imagine finding out that the person you built your entire life with has been living a double life for decades. What would you do if the betrayal wasn't just a fleeting mistake, but a deliberate choice hidden in plain sight? And what if the person involved in that betrayal wasn't a stranger, but someone you see every day living just opposite you? After 20 years of marriage, everything she thought she knew about her relationship was a lie. The man she loved and trusted had been hiding a secret, one that involved the neighbor living just next door. To truly understand this story, we need to start at the beginning, a picture-perfect marriage that began over 25 years ago. Sarah and Michael Mitchell were the kind of couple everyone admired. Sarah, a warm and devoted wife, spent her days caring for their home and raising their 2 children. Her kindness extended to everyone she met, and she was known for her welcoming smile and deep loyalty to her family. Michael Mitchell, a successful engineer, was seen as a steady provider, a man who loved his family and was admired for his reliability. Their home, nestled in a tree-lined neighborhood, was the envy of their friends. It wasn't just a house, it was where they celebrated holidays, hosted barbecues, and watched their children grow up. The neighborhood was a place where everyone knew each other, where doors were often left unlocked and where neighbors shared their lives. Among those neighbors was Emily Turner, a woman who lived just a few steps away. Emily had been part of Sarah and Michael Mitchell's lives for decades, always present at gatherings, and someone Sarah trusted completely. Emily was known for her charm and friendliness. She and Sarah often shared coffee and heartfelt conversations, exchanging stories about their families. Michael Mitchell, too, seemed to enjoy Emily's company, though no one thought much of it at the time. After all, Emily wasn't just a neighbor, she was a friend. But what happens when familiarity crosses a line? What happens when a bond that appears innocent hides something far more troubling? Behind the smiles, the warm greetings, and the years of shared experiences, something else had been growing, a secret that took decades to come to light, a truth so shocking it left an entire community questioning how they missed the signs. Sarah had no reason to doubt the life she had built with Michael Mitchell. Their marriage had its challenges like any other, but she trusted him without hesitation. She trusted Emily too. After all, how could she not? But sometimes trust is the very thing that blinds us to the truth. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated. Your support means the world to us and we truly appreciate it. Thank you. Michael Mitchell had a routine. He left for work every morning at 6:30 a.m., his coffee mug in hand, and returned home just in time for dinner. Weekends were spent fixing things around the house, tending the garden, or chatting casually with neighbors. Sarah, ever the nurturing wife, kept their home running smoothly. She took pride in the little things, preparing Michael Mitchell's favorite meals, keeping every corner of the house spotless, and making sure their family stayed close. Family gatherings were Sarah's favorite moments. Thanksgiving dinners, with everyone crowded around the table, Christmas mornings filled with the sound of wrapping paper tearing and laughter, and summer barbecues where Michael Mitchell manned the grill, flipping burgers, while Emily arrived with her famous potato salad. Life looked ordinary, even enviable. But what looks perfect on the surface can often hide something entirely different out of sight. Looking back, Sarah would later admit that there had been signs, small fleeting moments that she had brushed aside. Michael Mitchell coming home later than usual with excuses that didn't quite make sense. The occasional hushed phone calls that ended the moment Sarah entered the room. His frequent visits to Emily's house under the guise of helping with odd jobs. Sarah had thought nothing of it. Good neighbors helped each other, didn't they? But over time, those little signs began to paint a larger picture. Michael Mitchell grew more distant, his thoughts often somewhere else. He started keeping his phone closer, clutching it tightly in a way Sarah had never noticed before. Emily too began acting differently, avoiding Sarah's gaze during their conversations, changing the subject quickly when certain topics came up. Sarah found herself questioning everything. Was she imagining it? Was it all in her head? And then came the day that changed everything. It began like any other morning. The sun filtered through the curtains as Sarah tidied the living room, humming softly to herself. That's when she saw it. a slip of paper peeking out from Michael Mitchell's favorite book on the coffee table. At first she thought it was nothing, just a receipt or a note he'd forgotten, but curiosity got the better of her. She unfolded the paper, her hands shaking slightly as she read the words written inside. In an instant her world turned upside down. The life she thought she knew, the marriage she had cherished for decades, suddenly felt like it was built on a lie. What Sarah discovered that day was more than just a note. It was the key to a secret hiding in plain sight for years. The note wasn't meant for her, and wasn't something she was ever supposed to find, but it mentioned Emily. Not as a neighbor, not as a family friend, but in a way that made Sarah's heart race and her mind spin. For a moment she tried to dismiss it. She put the note back where she found it, but the questions wouldn't go away. A few days passed and life went on as usual, or at least it appeared to. But Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the note. Then one evening, while Michael Mitchell was in the shower, she noticed his phone sitting on the counter. It was unlocked. Sarah hesitated, her hands quivering as she reached for it. She had never invaded his privacy before, but something in her gut told her she needed to look. She opened his messages, and at first, everything looked normal. Conversations with colleagues, family, and friends. But then she saw Emily's name. The messages weren't explicit, but they carried a familiarity that didn't sit right. "Looking forward to tomorrow," one read. Another simply said, "I'll bring the wine this time." Sarah's mind reeled. Tomorrow? Wine? What were they talking about? She tried to convince herself it was nothing, but the timing of the messages matched perfectly with Michael Mitchell's late evenings and sudden errands. It was becoming harder to ignore. Instead of confronting him outright, Sarah decided to pay closer attention. Over the next few weeks, she began noticing the little things she had overlooked before. Michael Mitchell's quick glances at his phone, his sudden willingness to run errands, and the way Emily had become more reserved around her lately. Were they coincidences? Maybe. But each detail made Sarah doubt the trust she had always believed in. Things took a turn during a casual conversation with another neighbor. It was one of those friendly chats about the neighborhood. Nothing unusual. But then the neighbor mentioned how often she saw Michael Mitchell over at Emily's house, helping with this or that. "They're so close," she said, laughing as if it were a joke. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Was everyone seeing something she had refused to acknowledge? That evening, as Michael Mitchell sat reading in his favorite armchair, Sarah couldn't look at him the same way. How long had this been going on? And why had he chosen someone so close to their family? She needed answers, but she also needed proof, something undeniable. Sarah's quiet investigation continued. She searched through Michael Mitchell's belongings when he wasn't home, looking for anything that could confirm her worst fears. And then she found them, love cards exchanged with Emily over the years. The letters spoke of secret dinners, shared gifts, and moments Sarah had never known about. Each message felt like a betrayal, every detail another crack in the life she thought was hers. But the hardest part wasn't the evidence, it was the waiting. Sarah had to keep up appearances, hosting family dinners, sharing smiles with Michael Mitchell, and even making small talk with Emily, all while knowing what she now knew. It was a test of strength she never imagined she'd face. The weight of it all finally became unbearable. Sarah knew the confrontation was inevitable, but she couldn't shake the fear of what it would reveal. Would Michael Mitchell deny it? Would he try to explain it away? And if he did, could she ever believe him? Again? The life she had spent over 25 years building was hanging by a thread, and she had to decide whether to pull it or let it play out on its own. It was a quiet weekend afternoon when Michael Mitchell rushed out, claiming he needed to help Emily with some work around her house. Sarah watched him leave, her suspicions growing stronger. With the house to herself, she decided it was time to dig deeper. She stood in front of their shared filing cabinet, her heart pounding as she pulled open the drawers. She sifted through old records, travel receipts, and credit card statements, searching for anything out of the ordinary. At first it felt pointless, like searching for a needle in a haystack, but then she found it, a hotel receipt dated months earlier. It was for a boutique just 2 towns over, a place Sarah had never Been to with Michael Mitchell. Her breath caught when she saw the name on the reservation, Lawrence. She couldn't confront him, not yet. She needed more. Over the next few weeks, Sarah became an investigator in her own life. She began asking subtle questions, steering conversations, with mutual friends and neighbors toward Michael Mitchell and Emily. "They've always been close, haven't they?" she'd say, feigning casual curiosity. To her surprise, several people confirmed what she had begun to suspect, that Michael Mitchell and Emily's friendship had always seemed different. Some even claimed they had noticed it for years, but assumed it was harmless. For Sarah, every new piece of information was like a dagger to the heart. One neighbor, a woman who had lived across the street for decades, mentioned something Sarah couldn't ignore. Sarah was determined to find out every detail. Then came the overheard conversations. One afternoon, as Sarah tended to the garden by the side of their house, she caught a snippet of laughter drifting over from Emily's porch. Michael Mitchell's voice followed, then Emily's, breaking the quiet. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakably intimate. Sarah froze, her hands tightening around the gardening shears. The sound lingered in her mind, playing over and over long after the moment had passed. Piece by piece, the truth came into focus. This wasn't just a fling or a momentary mistake. What Sarah was beginning to realize went much deeper. The affair had lasted not just months but years, decades even. It wasn't limited to brief encounters or stolen moments. There had been trips they took together, celebrations they shared, and private milestones Michael Mitchell had never spoken of. Milestones Sarah had been kept in the dark about all along. But the revelations didn't stop there. Sarah discovered something she hadn't expected. Emily wasn't the only person Michael Mitchell had been deceiving her with. While the relationship with Emily was the longest and most significant, there were hints, love cards tucked away in drawers, of other women throughout the years. To Sarah it felt like betrayal upon betrayal, each layer more painful than the last. Sarah couldn't stay silent any longer. It wasn't planned. One afternoon, with her emotions boiling over, she found herself standing on Emily's doorstep. Her heart was pounding as she raised her hand to knock, and for a brief moment she thought about turning back. But everything she had discovered pushed her forward. She knocked firmly. When Emily opened the door, the color drained from her face. Neither woman spoke at first. Sarah's stare said it all. Emily hesitated, gripping the edge of the door as though it could protect her from what was coming. "We need to talk," Sarah said, her voice steady but full of pain. Inside, they sat across from each other in the living room. Emily shifted uncomfortably, refusing to look Sarah in the eye. The silence dragged on until Sarah couldn't take it anymore. "How long?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "How long have you and Michael Mitchell been involved?" Emily looked down. She struggled to find the words. "Sarah," she stammered, her voice soft and shaky. "I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," Sarah snapped, her tone cutting. "I don't want an apology. I want the truth." And then Emily broke down. The words spilled out as she spoke of secret meetings, stolen moments, and years of deception covered by friendly smiles and casual conversation. The affair, Emily admitted, had started over a decade ago. She had tried to end it once. But Michael Mitchell wouldn't let her go. "He said he couldn't imagine his life without me," Emily confessed, tears streaming down her face. "He said it was complicated, but he didn't want to lose either of us." Sarah sat motionless, her thoughts racing. She remembered every time she had trusted Emily, welcomed her into her home and treated her like family. "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "I treated you like family." "Is this how you repay me?" Emily sobbed, clutching her hands together. "I loved him," she said through her tears. "I know it's wrong, but I did. I was selfish. I didn't think about how much it would hurt you." Sarah stood up, anger boiling inside her as she tried to process what she was hearing. The life she thought she had, the man she thought she knew, it was all an illusion. For weeks after discovering the truth, Sarah didn't confront Michael Mitchell. She was waiting for the right moment, but she couldn't keep it to herself forever. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all needed an outlet. One day, when Michael Mitchell left for work, Sarah called her daughter, and shared what she had found. There was silence on the other end before her daughter finally responded, her voice full of disbelief and anger. "How could Dad do this to us?" she asked, her words heavy with frustration and heartbreak. Sarah's son, always the quieter of the two, reacted differently when she told him. He listened carefully before offering quiet support. "Mum, we'll get through this," he said firmly. Her closest friend was the last person she confided in. Over coffee at her kitchen table, Sarah let everything out. Her friend sat in stunned silence, shaking her head. "I never would have thought Michael Mitchell was capable of this," she said, her tone a mix of anger and sadness. "You don't deserve this, Sarah." Before long, other neighbors began to hear what had happened. Many were disappointed in Emily and Michael Mitchell, but Sarah became the subject of whispers, the woman who'd been lied to for decades. Yet no one truly understood the storm raging. Inside her, not her children, not her friends, no one. It was an ordinary evening, much like the countless evenings that had come before. Michael Mitchell sat in the living room, thumbing through the newspaper, his face calm as if everything was perfectly normal. Sarah stood in the doorway watching him. How could he act so indifferent? How could he sit there knowing everything he had done? The anger and grief churned inside her, but she kept her voice steady as she stepped into the room. "We need to talk," she said, her tone firm. Michael Mitchell glanced up briefly, raising an eyebrow, but showing no real concern. "What about?" he asked casually, flipping another page of the paper. Sarah hesitated, but then the words tumbled out. She told him everything she knew about the love cards, the hotel receipt, what Emily had confessed, and even how the neighbors had noticed his frequent visits to Emily's house. But Michael Mitchell didn't flinch. He denied it all with a smirk, brushing off her words like they were baseless accusations. "You've got it all wrong," he said, chuckling under his breath. "Emily? Really, Sarah, you're being ridiculous." Sarah's hands balled into fists as she fought to stay calm. She brought out the evidence, everything she had found. "Are you still going to deny this?" she asked, her voice tight with anger. Michael Mitchell glanced at the items she placed in front of him, but leaned back in his chair, laughing. "You're overthinking things, Sarah," he said dismissively. "I don't know what Emily told you, but you're letting your imagination run wild." As Michael Mitchell laughed, Sarah felt a surge of anger she could no longer contain. The rage she had been holding back boiled over, but she didn't show it. Instead, she gave a small nod. "You're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I'm overthinking." Michael Mitchell shrugged, returning to his newspaper, oblivious to the storm raging within her. Sarah walked to the kitchen, her mind racing, her heart pounding. In the kitchen, she paused, gripping the counter to steady herself. Her eyes fell on the heavy cast-iron skillet sitting by the stove. Memories of their life together flooded her mind. The laughter, the arguments, the love she had poured into their marriage, and the betrayal that had destroyed it all. The sound of Michael Mitchell's laughter echoed in her ears, mocking her, taunting her. She picked up the skillet, gripping it tightly with both hands. Everything around her felt distant, her focus locked on Michael Mitchell. She walked back into the living room. Michael Mitchell looked up from his newspaper, confused, but before he could say anything, Sarah swung the skillet with all her strength from behind. The room echoed with the sound of the impact as the newspaper fell from his hands, and Michael Mitchell slumped forward. Sarah didn't stop. She kept hitting him, each blow harder than the last. When it was over, Sarah called the police to report herself. By the time the police arrived, the house was quiet. Michael Mitchell lay lifeless in the living room, the crumpled newspaper still in his hand. Sarah sat at the dining table staring into space. The skillet lay on the floor beside her, a stark sign of what had just happened. Sarah was arrested without resistance. She said nothing as the officers led her out of the house in handcuffs. At the station, she was fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. The following days were filled with legal proceedings, interrogations and consultations with her court-appointed attorney. News of what happened spread quickly, making Sarah the subject of neighborhood gossip. Some pitied her, while others were horrified by her actions. When the day of her trial arrived, the courtroom was packed. Friends, neighbors, and reporters filled the benches, eager to hear the outcome. The judge listened as the evidence was presented. Michael Mitchell's injuries, the skillet, Sarah's confession. When it was time for the verdict, Sarah sat motionless. The judge handed down a sentence of 20 years in prison. Sarah remained stoic as the verdict was read, her eyes fixed on the floor. The life she had known was over. As for Emily, the scandal left her shunned by the community. The whispers and judgment became too much to bear, and she packed her things and quietly moved away from the neighborhood, leaving behind the life she had built there. Trust. It's the cornerstone of every lasting relationship, the invisible thread that holds everything together, from the first vows to the last shared moments. Sarah's story forces us to ask, how can we rebuild when the foundation of trust has crumbled? This is a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and the long, painful road to facing the truth. It's a reminder that the cost of secrets is high, and no one escapes unchanged. But what would you have done in Sarah's shoes? How far would you go to find the truth? Thank you for watching. If you want to see more stories about betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Stay tuned for more real-life crime tales that will leave you questioning the truth. And remember, the truth is always stranger than fiction. Make sure to check it out and let us know your thoughts in the comment section.